Imagine you are standing in a long line for a popular new restaurant. You have already waited for an hour. Now, you hear that the food isn't very good, and the prices are far too high. Do you leave? Many people would say no, they would stay, not because they still want to eat there, but because they have already invested so much time waiting. They feel they have to see it through. This simple idea is very similar to a serious problem in world politics known as the commitment trap. It explains how countries can become stuck on a dangerous path, not because it is a good idea, but because they made a strong promise in the past and feel they cannot turn back now. In international relations, the commitment trap is a situation where a nation's leaders feel forced to follow through on a public pledge or a long-standing policy, even when circumstances have changed and the policy is becoming incredibly costly or risky. It is like that person in the restaurant line, but the stakes are much higher, involving national security, economic stability, and human lives. This concept was famously explored by political scientist Scott Sagan, who showed how public threats and alliance promises can lock countries into a course of action, removing their flexibility and pushing them closer to conflict, sometimes against their better judgment. It is a powerful force that can make war more likely. This very trap is now tightening around three major global players: Israel, Iran, and the United States. Each of these nations has made powerful public commitments over many years regarding their security and their regional goals. Israel has sworn to prevent Iran from ever developing nuclear weapons. Iran has invested its national pride and vast resources into its nuclear program, vowing never to back down. The United States in turn has promised to defend Israel's security while also pledging to stop a nuclear-armed Iran. These promises have become central to each nation's identity and political landscape, creating a standoff where backing down seems impossible. The danger of this situation has become alarmingly clear in recent months. The interlocking commitments have created a cycle of attack and counterattack that is escalating dangerously. It is a textbook example of how the commitment trap works in the real world. Leaders on all sides find their hands tied by their own past words and policies. They are driven forward not by a clear strategy for victory or peace, but by the perceived need to uphold their nation's credibility and honor. This pressure makes it incredibly difficult to find an off-ramp or a peaceful way to de-escalate, pushing the entire region closer to a devastating large-scale war. For decades, Israel has maintained one clear, unwavering public commitment. It will not, under any circumstances, allow the Islamic Republic of Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. This is not just a policy preference for Israeli leaders. It is presented to their public and to the world as an existential necessity, a matter of national survival. The nation's security doctrine is built upon the idea of preemption, acting first to eliminate a threat before it can fully form. This principle, combined with its long-held status as the region's sole, though unconfirmed, nuclear power, has created a powerful commitment that is now driving its actions with incredible force, leaving very little room for diplomatic maneuvers or compromise. This deep-seated commitment has trapped Israeli leaders in a cycle of escalation. Having repeatedly declared that a nuclear Iran is an unacceptable outcome that must be prevented by any means necessary, they are now compelled to act on that promise. To do otherwise would be seen as a sign of weakness, both at home and by their adversaries. This is why we have witnessed successive rounds of Israeli air assaults on Iranian targets. These actions are the logical conclusion of their long-standing public vow. The government feels it must demonstrate its resolve, even if each strike carries the immense risk of a powerful retaliation and a wider, more destructive regional conflict. The consequences of this commitment are now being felt directly by the Israeli people. In response to Israel's military actions, recent Iranian retaliatory strikes have managed to reach major cities like Tel Aviv. As of mid-June 2025, these attacks have tragically resulted in the deaths of at least 24 Israelis. This devastating outcome highlights the immense cost of being caught in the commitment trap. The very policy designed to guarantee the nation's security is now bringing the conflict directly to its citizens' doorsteps, creating fear and uncertainty. The promise of ultimate safety through preemptive action is proving to be a dangerous and painful path. Furthermore, the recent Iranian attacks have done more than just cause physical damage. they have also begun to undermine public confidence in Israel's famed Iron Dome missile defense system. While the system has been remarkably effective in the past, the scale and sophistication of the latest barrages have shown that it is not impenetrable. This growing vulnerability only increases the pressure on Israeli leaders. They are stuck. If they stop their attacks on Iran, they risk being seen as weak and failing their primary commitment. If they continue, they risk more retaliatory strikes that their defenses may not fully stop, further endangering their population. Iran is caught in its own powerful commitment trap, one forged from decades of revolutionary ideology, national pride, and immense financial investment. For the leadership in Tehran, the nuclear program is far more than a strategic project. It is a symbol of the nation's scientific advancement, its sovereignty, and its resistance to Western pressure. The regime has spent billions of dollars and staked its credibility on developing this capability. To abandon it now, especially under pressure from Israel and the United States, would be seen as a profound national humiliation. This deep investment of resources and reputation makes it nearly impossible for leaders to change course without losing face. The commitment is also ideological. Since the 1979 revolution, a core part of the regime's identity has been its staunch opposition to Israel, which it refers to as the Zionist entity, and its defiance of the United States, the Great Satan. This rhetoric is not just for show, it is a promise to its hardline supporters and its regional allies, or proxies, that Iran will never bow to its enemies. The government feels bound by these long-standing declarations. Backing down from its nuclear ambitions or failing to respond to an Israeli attack would be viewed as a betrayal of its revolutionary principles, potentially weakening its grip on power at home and its influence across the Middle East. This is why Iran has felt compelled to respond so forcefully to recent Israeli actions. When Israel launches airstrikes, Iran's leaders are trapped by their own promises of strength and retaliation. They must strike back to maintain their credibility. The recent missile attacks on Tel Aviv are a direct result of this trap. They are a signal to their people, their allies, and their enemies that Iran will not be intimidated. These retaliatory strikes are a costly and dangerous move, risking a much larger war. But from Tehran's perspective, the cost of inaction, appearing weak and submissive, is perceived as even greater, making retaliation feel like the only viable option. This dynamic is a classic example of what economists call the sunk cost fallacy. Iran has already poured so much into its nuclear program and its anti-Western stance that giving up now feels like wasting all that past effort and investment. The leaders continue on the same path not because it promises a better future, but because they cannot bear to abandon the costs of the past. This makes finding a peaceful resolution incredibly difficult. Iran's national identity is now so intertwined with its nuclear ambitions and its posture of defiance that it has become a prisoner to its own historical commitments, pushing it further down a path of confrontation. The United States finds itself ensnared in a particularly complex commitment trap, caught between two powerful and conflicting promises. For generations, American presidents from both political parties have made an ironclad pledge to ensure the security of Israel. This is a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, backed by billions of dollars in annual aid and deep political support. At the same time, the U.S. has also made a firm, public vow to prevent Iran from ever developing a nuclear weapon. These two commitments, once seen as complementary, have now become a source of immense pressure, pulling Washington in different directions as the conflict escalates. This double bind forces the United States into a reactive and dangerous position. Because of its promise to Israel, it is difficult for Washington to restrain its ally from taking preemptive military action against Iran. Any attempt to do so could be seen as abandoning its long-standing commitment. Yet, by supporting or even tacitly accepting Israeli strikes, the U.S. gets drawn deeper into the conflict. Its own troops stationed across the region, in places like Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, become potential targets for Iranian retaliation. These troops represent a sunk cost of American policy. They were placed there to maintain stability, but now act as tripwires for a larger war. The American commitment trap limits its diplomatic options severely. The U.S. cannot easily pivot to a new strategy or broker a compromise without being accused of breaking one of its core promises. If it pushes for a deal that allows Iran some level of uranium enrichment, it will be seen as failing its commitment to prevent a nuclear Iran and endangering Israel. If it fully backs Israeli military action, It risks being dragged into a direct war that the American public does not want. This leaves US leaders with very few good choices, forcing them to navigate a narrow and treacherous path, hoping to avoid the worst-case scenario. Ultimately, the commitment trap reveals a fundamental challenge for leaders. The difficulty of admitting a past policy is no longer working. Promises, once made on the world stage, create their own momentum. National honor, political survival, and international credibility all get tied to seeing these commitments through, regardless of the rising cost. For Israel, Iran, and the United States, their past vows have become cages, limiting their freedom to adapt to a rapidly changing and increasingly perilous reality. Escaping this trap would require immense political courage, the courage to choose a new path, even if it means breaking with the promises of the past.